All right, y'all. Good morning. What's up? It's Saturday morning. Another world according to romance. I'm gonna get another video in before I go to work. Um, Good to see all y'all out there. Good for you to see me, I guess. Today we're going to be on part 4 of the Trojan War, and this is the story of the story. This is the actual, as best as I can get it in a concise few minutes, a breakdown of the story and why you should know the story, why the story is important to you. Uh, in the modern era and so forth. So, without further ado, let's just get started. Oh, once again, please go to YouTube, go look up The World According to Romance, subscribe, please, man, help me build this channel. It's been building, and I thank all of you guys who've been helping me out and subscribing, man. All the worst case scenario is if you subscribe, you're gonna see this shit. You're gonna get notifications when I make these things. All right, that's all that's gonna happen. That's it. It's free, no big deal. All right, so the Trojan War, a.k.a. the Illiad, all right, written by Homer. We went over Homer and who he was in my last show. Basically, the gods are all at a wedding. They all go to a wedding. And they didn't invite one of the goddesses. Her name is Eris, E-R-I-S, and she is also the goddess of discord. Nobody wanted her there because they didn't want her to fuck up the party. Well, she showed up anyway and fucked it up. She just shows up in the middle of the party, poof, and a cloud of smoke, drops a golden apple with a little tag on it that says, "To the fairest," and disappears. Well, everyone there goes apeshit. The gods all start fighting over each other. Well, I'm the fairest. No, all the goddesses, I'm the fairest. No, I'm the fairest. Adonis, I'm the fairest. All right, well, everyone was fighting. They narrowed it down to 3 goddesses. Hera, the queen of the gods. Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, and Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love. Hey. And they're like, all right, we can't figure out who. The gods couldn't decide who it is. They say, ooh, I know, let's pick a mortal to decide. Yeah, that's our favorite. Let's pick a mortal. So they're looking around Earth, and they see on this hillside near Troy a young prince named Paris who's attending some sheep, and they decide to make him the judge. So the 3 goddesses appear to him, and they say, all right. First, Hera says, if you make me give me this apple and make me the fairest, I'll make you king of Athens. All right. Athena says, if you make me the fairest, I'll make you unstoppable in war. You'll be able to beat everyone's ass. And Aphrodite says, if you make me the fairest, I'll give you the most beautiful girl in the world. Well, somehow Paris fell for Aphrodite. He was a lonely boy, I guess, and he fell for Aphrodite's present, and he declared Aphrodite the fairest. She probably was the hottest goddess. I mean, she's the goddess of beauty. So maybe Paris was just being honest. I don't know. But he went with the most beautiful girl in the world. All right, problem. Most beautiful girl in the world's already married. To who? The king of Sparta. His name is Menelaus. And it just so happens that Paris's dad, Priam, who is the king of the city of Troy, it has a business meeting the following week with Menelaus's brother at Menelaus's brother's palace at Mycenae. His name is Agamemnon, and he's pretty much the capo di capi. He's the king of kings of the Greeks. So they're at this big meeting. Priam's there. Everyone's chilling. Paris goes along, and there he does meet Helen of Troy. And I don't know if Aphrodite sprinkled a little goddess pixie dust onto Helen and made her fall in love, or if Helen just fell in love with Paris. But they meet. I think he hits that, and some stories say he abducted her, like against her will, like he threw her over his shoulders and ran off with her, and some say that she willingly went. So it depends on which story you read. I think that Homer uses the word abducted, but I also think she doesn't really put up much of a fight in Homer's story. And again, there's the Homer story, and there's a lot of other additions later on. There's a lot of other stories that later writers wrote and added to it, and somehow they just got tacked on. Look, Batman's first episode came out in 1935. It's now 2018. How many freaking extra episodes did we add on to that? You know what I'm saying? How many movies have come out? Think of it that way. This is a rolling thing that you've known and that it's come to you over thousands of years. So not all of the Homer, and I'll get into that a little bit later on, the Homer Illiad versus all the other ones. So Menelaus is like on his business. Menelaus is like away from his wife. He's with all the guys, and he realizes his wife is gone. He realizes that the Trojans are gone. Priam left with his son Paris and with Helen. Once they put all those factors together, Agamemnon is like, yeah, you're my brother, and he stole your wife. I'm going to kick his ass. Let's everyone kick their ass. See, the thing about Troy is it's a prosperous city. It's a strategic city. It's located in a strategic position. If you can control Troy, you can control trade between north, west, south, and east in that region. Like the crossroads are right there. You have a lot of control with the city of Troy. So it's always been a prosperous city, and I think Agamemnon was using this as a ruse for economic purposes. He wanted to take over the city of Troy. So he calls in all the numbers. He calls in all the boys. Every king, because the word king comes from the word kin. The person who has the most kin is the king. Whoever has the most family is the king. So there's lots of kings all around. And Greece is mostly you get around by boats. There's lots of mountains. It's hard to get around by land. So there's lots of little kingdoms, okay? All right, there was a lot of famous Greek warriors. There was Nestor. Nestor is the oldest Greek warrior, all right? He was 90 years old, still fathering children, still marrying women, and still going into battle. Whenever I feel like I'm getting too old, I think of Nestor, and I remember that he still had children at age 90. One day I'll be like Nestor, I hope. All right, and then there was, all right, you already know Menelaus, you know Agamemnon. There was Ajax the Greater and Ajax the Smaller. Ajax the Greater was the Hulk of the crew. He was big. He was a real big boy, and he wore old school armor. He didn't dress like the rest of the Greeks. There was Odysseus, the clever, wise, wily fox of the bunch. He is the king of Ithaca, a little kingdom on the western edge of Greece, an insignificant kingdom. He's the smartest of the Greeks, or at least the wisest, the fox of the gang. And then there's Achilles. Achilles is the almost godlike warrior. His dad is Zeus, so he's half god. His mother is Thetis, who's a nymph but also human. And he is actually human. He's mortal. But his mother ran down to Hades when he was born and dipped his whole entire body in the river Styx. But she had to hold him by his heel. And that is the only part of his body that can be hit by weapons, his heel. So he's nasty in battle. Well, everybody's down to go to this war. It's 1,000 ships, they say, are loaded. Helen was the face that launched 1,000 ships. There was probably not exactly 1,000, all right? I'm sure they didn't get, we only have 998 ships. Can we just round that up a little bit? I'm sure there wasn't quite 1,000, but something close to that number. There was, in the Bronze Age, a group of 20 to 50,000 men could be mustered. It was possible. The two guys that didn't want to go on this was Odysseus, okay, who gets his own book after, the second book is the Odyssey. It's named after Odysseus. It's his story. He didn't want to go. He was about his wifey. He was in love with his new wife. He's the new king of this kingdom. He's about to have a baby. Last thing he wanted to do was leave. And also, he's one of the few proponents of anti-war. All my favorite stories in history, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, this, Apocalypse, every Apocalypse Now, every freaking great story. The Godfather is supposedly an anti-war story. Like, everything's an anti-war story. This is really an anti-war story. It's about the futility of war, how in the end, nobody gets shit. Everyone fucking dies, and the whole Bronze Age collapses. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. All right, so the Homer's, story doesn't pick up until the last 50. They're outside of Troy. They've sieged Troy for 10 years. 10 years go by, and it's the last 50 days of this 10 years. Achilles also didn't want to fight. Achilles had a big head on him. He did not like Agamemnon. He did not like Menelaus. He didn't like most of the other Greeks. He was a bad boy, and he knew he was a bad boy, and he didn't want to really fight. And his mother didn't want him to go because there was a prophecy he would die in Troy, which ends up coming true. But he was like, "There's no way I'm not going in this war. If it's going to be this big, I got to be there and be the number one guy in the fight." Which he was. All right, so they get to Troy. Now, when they get to Troy, if you've seen the movie, and probably the best thing to do is watch the movie. I'll get to that later. In the movie, there's a pretty good scene where Menelaus, all the Greeks are outside of Troy, and they're like, "Why don't you come out and fight me? You stole my wife." He's like yelling at Paris, and then Paris actually comes out, and Paris is basically a little boy, and he gets his ass beat by Menelaus. Until Paris' older brother, Hector. Hector is the number one Trojan warrior. He's the number one warrior of Troy. He's almost equal to Achilles in his battle, only he's not impervious to weaponry like Achilles is. So Achilles versus Hector is the name of the game in the Trojan War. And Hector comes out and fights Menelaus for his brother, scoops up his brother and runs back in the city with him. And the Greeks are still sieging the city. Eventually, the showdown between Achilles and Hector happens, and again the gods are all divided. Not just the humans are divided, but the gods are all divided. Apollo, Artemis, Aphrodite, they're all on team. They're all on team. My neighbor Jack saying good day. Jack Rivera, give him props, give him love. All of those three gods are on Team Troy, where Hera's always the bad girl. She's always hates somebody. Like the hero is always a son of Zeus that is not Hera's child, and she hates him. Hercules is like that. Perseus is like that, and Achilles is like that. She hates Achilles. Or no, she wants Achilles to win, but she's on the Greek side, but she doesn't like Achilles. It's really twisted. And there's a lot of twists like this. I don't have everything perfectly in order story-wise, and I apologize about that. But eventually, Achilles and Hector go at it, okay? And this is, before this happens, Achilles was refusing to fight, but Achilles has a the history calls him his friend. History calls him his cousin. It's his lover. Okay, Greeks men had lovers. Before monotheism, most of the ancient world, like bisexuality was no big thing. So Achilles had a little, almost a smaller version of himself that he was in love with, named Patroclus. Achilles was refusing to fight because he found this chick, and they somehow, Menelaus and Agamemnon sacrificed this chick. Achilles liked this girl, and Agamemnon and Menelaus sacrificed her to the gods. And also Menelaus sacrificed his daughter to get good wins in order to get there. It's another part of the story I didn't really go into. A lot of human sacrifice in the story, which is not usual for Greek myths. But anyway, Agamemnon's pissed. He refuses to fight. So Patroclus puts on his armor and is like, "I'm Achilles. Everyone follow me." And everyone thinks it's Achilles. And they have this idea where they're going to scale the wall, and they're finally going to get over it and attack this city and burn it down. And as Patroclus is climbing up the wall, Hector sees him, and he shoots him with an arrow and kills him, and he falls back down off the wall. When Achilles finds out about this, he's pissed. He just gets in his chariot. He's all by himself. He's just driving around the front gates, people are shooting at him with arrows. He don't care. He's Achilles. He's calling out Hector, "You come out here now, me versus you, one-on-one combat," because that's how they did it back then. And that one-on-one combat happens a lot in the Bronze Age, and it's remarked upon very much by Homer, and it was obviously revered in the Iron Age as well. One-on-one combat. So they go at it, and they go into one-on-one combat, and it's a great fight. Achilles doesn't just beat the shit out of him. Achilles takes a couple falls. He takes a couple rough ones. But he does slay Hector. And when he does, he ties him to the back of his chariot and drags him around the city of Troy, his body, and disrespects him. When he has a funeral for Patroclus, he burns Patroclus and honors him, and but he lets Hector's body out to be eaten by dogs, and the gods are offended by this because Hector was a great warrior, so they start getting mad at Achilles. The next day, Paris goes out to battle, and he hits Achilles in the heel and kills him. So Achilles dies, and the Greeks are like busted up about this. So they decide, what are we going to do, man? We've been here for 10 years. What the fuck? And Odysseus comes up with this idea. Look, man, let's take one of the boats. We're going to make it into a horse, all right? And we'll say it's a gift of Poseidon, because Poseidon was also a horse god, aside, I don't know why, because he's the water god, but somehow he was the god of horses. He's also the god of earthquakes. Somehow they made this horse. A bunch of guys hid inside of it. All the Greeks left. They acted like they sailed away. They hid on like behind an island a couple miles away. It looked like they sailed away. And the Trojans saw this horse. They opened their doors, and they start partying. We won. The war's finally over after 10 years, and they party like it's 1999. They get drunk. They get shitty. Once they're all fucked up, the guys inside of the horse come down. Everyone's passed out in the city because they're drunk. They open the gates. The rest of the Greeks came back. They didn't actually leave. They just hid. They sacked the city, and that's the end of Troy, and that's the end of the story. The rest of the story of Odysseus is the Odyssey of him getting home, and then there's other stories that are the songs of return. Now, all right, what's the big deal about this story? Again, the main theme here is the futility of war. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. It is good for very many good stories. We have lots of good stories because of war. I will give war that much. War is not boring. But war is futile, and war kills people, and war ends lives, and war separates children from their parents, etc., and so on. The reason you should know this story is because I'm into old. I'm into anything old. I'm into getting into the mind of the ancients, and this is a snapshot of the ancients' mind at work. This is an amalgamation. It was the story that was told bardically verbally for 500 years. Then it was written down, and then for hundreds of years it's continued to be written down, and it's been embellished. All the great people, Julius Caesar loved this story. Okay, Alexander the Great thought he was Achilles. Da Vinci, Michelangelo, they all made great pieces of art that centered around this story, man. Like writers, the whole word Renaissance is a rebirth of the art and literature of the ancient world. What literature, you ask? This very literature I'm talking to you about. This is the most important story of the ancient world. Definitely the most important story of the ancient Greeks. If you don't know the story of the Trojan War or the Odyssey, the movie Troy only covers the Trojan War. And there has been shitty movies about... The best movie of the Odyssey is a 1950s movie with Kirk Douglas. Still to this day, there was one made in the 90s that had a bunch of B-grade actors that was kind of shitty. It was a TV movie. The best thing to do in this day and age is to watch the movies to get the whole gist of it. It really is. Like, I know it's good to read. I read all the time, but when you go on internet, you're reading all the time. Like, the sitting down and reading of a book is very hard and long in this day and age, so I recommend the movie if you just want to get the gist of the story. If you want to read the book, do yourself a favor, unless you're like at least at a 200 to 300 level college, like literary degree, like unless you're like majoring in English in college and you have an understanding of like Iron Age Greek thought, it's kind of pointless to try to read. If it says Homer's Iliad, don't buy it. Don't read it, because it's going to be in Homer's language. It's going to be the way Homer talked and wrote, and You're not going to understand it. It reads like the Bible, like the early part of the Bible. Like it was written so long ago, it just fucking is weird and doesn't make sense the way they talk. Like he calls Apollo light bearer one time, and then Apollo sun giver the next, and then Apollo Phoebus. Like he calls weird shit like that happens all over this book. All right, and so the best thing to do is read a modern adaptation of it, if you can, like something that is modernized. Don't read Homer's version of it. You're going to get bored. You're going to get confused. I've tried it, and I got confused, and I know the fucking story, and I know about the ancient Greek mind thought in the Iron Age. But it is important for you to know this. I just hit 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop the video here. Everybody have a great Saturday. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube. My name is Richie Romance, and this is The World According to Romance. I got 2 more shows coming on the Greek War, on the Trojan War. One's going to be about Heinrich Schliemann, the original archaeologist. You got to know about this guy, man. Wait till you hear this one about Heinrich Schliemann. This guy's the P.T. Barnum of archaeology. And then the rest of the archaeological digs. I know more about the archaeology of the Trojan War than I do about almost any other archaeology except a few things in Egypt. King Tut, Howard Carter, I've already brought that to you. Those are the 2. I don't demand that you know many archaeologists, but Howard Carter and Heinrich Schliemann, you better know, and I'm going to imprint it in your brain. Have a great weekend, people. I'll be back soon. Peace. Oh, and don't forget, next week, we got a new video on the Celts, a new series on the Celts coming. Jason McNally, I'm thinking of you, my Celtic brother. Peace.